Hey, everybody. It's Wednesday, February 19th, and time for another edition of Wednesday with Walton and Reis. I'm Brian Walton. That's Kyle Reis.
Hi,
Welcome,
Brian. How
Kyle.
are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. So, a lot of things to talk about with the big leaguers now in camp and workouts underway and all. But of course, our focus, primarily here is about the minor leagues, or at least in some cases, minor league players in big league camp. So we'll talk a little bit about the pitching situation. Pitchers and catchers, of course, were first there. Of course, step camp is underway, which is the minor league camp, sort of the second camp after the early development camp they had and before regular minor league spring camp. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then, of course, the first spring training game is just coming this weekend. And FanDuel Sports Midwest, I almost said Bally. FanDuel Sports Midwest has announced their schedule of games. So we'll just talk briefly about that as well. It's because the Cardinals, will be on television this spring, as they have in the past years, about a dozen games, but some other games picked up sometimes by the opponents' networks as well. So let's start with the starting pitching derby. On one hand, I think everybody knows the Cardinals, even after they, let Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson go, they have five starters, four of whom are veterans. And of course, I'm talking about Gray Michaelis, Matz, Eric Fetty, and of course, Andre Palante, who earned his way on last year. Let's talk about, of course, the odds of those guys making it through the year are low without, somebody being injured. And in the very first day that Oliver Marmol met with the media, one of the guys, and it wasn't me, but one of the guys there asked him, what about your starting pitching? Who's going to be your number six? Have you thought about a six-man rotation? He of course waved it off early and said the same thing I just said, which is, we got to see who gets out of spring healthy and productive and ready to go. I will tell you that one observation I've had is that Michaelis has been thrown every fifth day, and he's throwing goodly number of pitches. Matz had been down here early throwing as well. I've seen Gray and Fetty, they were, of course, down early down when pitchers and catchers were supposed to report. Palante's been there, all the others as well. But guys are throwing off the mound. And, I purposely did not take the radar gun with me to the park early on because it would be misleading whatever I saw on the gun anyway. So I didn't even bother. But I mean, these guys are, the old days of guys coming to camp out of shape and using camp to get ready. That's not the case anymore. These guys are working year round. And, it's kind of weird on one hand to say, hey, the first games are only 3-4 days away. But I think these guys are ready, and they'd much rather be playing games than just, throwing bullpens and having batting practice.
Well, see, that for me, that's great to hear because one of the things that we have seen over the last two spring trainings, of course, 2 years ago we had the World Baseball Classic, and then last year there was a sort of deliberate slowing down of camp from the start. They talked about veterans and being a little bit older last year and wanting to be a little bit more deliberate, a little slower in attacking spring training. And for me, I think that had a negative impact when it came to starting the season. We saw them have a lot of trouble hitting home runs in spring training. We saw the offense have a lot of trouble to jumpstart. There was a lack of urgency in spring training last year. So to hear,
And by the way, and they got out of the gates slowly in the regular season as well. And you almost have to say there's a cause and effect there. Now, of course, the years they have the best record in all of baseball in spring training and don't play well, we kind of forget that. But there's something to be said for having momentum going into the regular season.
yeah, that's why, not like you can look at wins and losses and spring training, and they don't really mean anything. What you're looking for is the individual results. And last year we saw the individual results, and it was not terrible, or it was terrible. It was not particularly good across the board. Arenado wasn't good. Goldschmidt wasn't good. Everybody wasn't good. And then you had a lot of pitchers, and we'll see this as spring training games kick up. You'll have a lot of starters who will work on the backfields for sure. But it's important that you are finding your pace, maybe not necessarily early in spring training, because sometimes early spring training success leads to overreaction and maybe some poor roster decisions because of early spring success. But what you want to see is you want to see a pace created and a pace that propels you to the regular season. So to hear you talk about the pitchers, and yeah, I mean, we've been talking about Michaelis now for 3 weeks. Matt's like to see that the pitchers are ahead and are on pace for that is really encouraging if the goal is to be competitive again this year.
That's right.
So,
And let's face it, that's all we have right now. Again, I didn't pull out the gun and I didn't pull it out on purpose, but a guy can look good, as well on a bullpen mound and get shelled in the game. So, we'll have to see. But again, it's better. I think I agree with you. It's better that they're here, they're working, they're maybe closer to being ready than they would have been in the past.
Yeah, and it's been fascinating to hear some of the news coming out about the pecking order of starting pitchers. I know one of the things that I was most interested to find out this weekend is, and it probably just so that he's ready to be a long man out of the bullpen. It might be minor league pitching depth, but they announced that Kyle Lehigh might end up stretching out to be a starter, and you think about that, Libertor stretching out to be a starter, whatever role Zach Thompson has, which was supposed to be designed to stretch out as a starter. It's and then when you have the context of that, you know that Chaim Bloom, one of his things and of his group is you make sure that pitchers, you let them incubate a little bit longer before they make their major league debut. Like you're more sure that they're ready than you might put them out on a limb. So then like you can see where there's backfilling that's going to happen, and maybe some guys that you would think might start the year at AAA might start back at AA. So there's a weird depth thing going on. And also probably some prep for long inning relief out of the bullpen to start the year, which I imagine Kyle Leahy and both Matthew Liberatore will fill in some capacity if everybody makes it through spring healthy.
And maybe Zach Thompson too. It's not as clear, but certainly he has a starting history. I went back and looked at Leahy's numbers. He was a starter in 2018 in Johnson City, a starter again in Peoria 2019. Was a swingman in 2021. 2022, he started at Springfield, and that was pretty much it. And not in a single one of those years did he have an ERA under 5.
Yeah, and it was really tough to watch. He's a really interesting guy, and he's worked on a 2-seam to go with his 4-seam. We heard that at winter warmup. So it's the issue with him is he's always had really good stuff, and his metrics are really good, but he just didn't know how to throw his stuff. So you would see him in AA have 2 or 3 dominant innings and then get hammered. And it was because by the time you get to the second time through the lineup, the stuff that's good doesn't matter if you're throwing it down the middle of the plate or you're not getting off the edges. They know it's going to be a strike. So maybe they can get something out of it. Maybe they can squeeze a little bit more juice out of it. We know that part of this is the forward thinking, seeing the metrics and knowing that he has starting pitching tendencies and thinking maybe we can get something more out of this. But I think as they get more familiar with him as a person and as a pitcher, they'll see that letting him max out of the bullpen is probably the best bet for his long-term success.
Yeah, and right now, if there was a number 6, I think we'd agree Michael McGreevy is it. After that, though, it's very interesting. Could be the guys we're talking about here. Could be Rodri Munoz, who's a guy that came over from Miami. He has some experience. Tall, kind of a tall, skinny, lanky guy. I didn't really get a chance to get a read on his offerings yet. And then, of course, the guys who are getting the most attention right now, which is Quinn Matthews, who it appears is going to get a start in one of the very early games of camp. And I'll tell a side story here. Just the other day, I guess over the weekend on the backfields, I see Mr. DeWitt, Bill DeWitt Jr. Now, this is not coming to see the major leaguers and big, the guys, the early arrivals in big league camp. He's coming to the backfields. And so I caught his attention, started up a brief conversation with him, and he says, I'm here to see this Matthews kid. I haven't seen him pitch yet. It's kind of interesting. The owner wants to see Quinn Matthews pitch.
Yeah, they've always seemed extra invested in the minor leagues, not just because of the cheap, labor of it all. And I don't mean it in such harsh terms. It was just the first thing.
Inexpensive labor, Kyle.
Thank you very much.
Cost efficient.
I love it. That's it. Yeah, it's not just because of the cost efficient nature of but they love minor league baseball. They love that aspect of they talk about draft and development and being a draft and development organization, but they do really like that. And it's part of I think the romantic nature of sport, the sport for them too. So I know that he likes to spend some time on the backfields. Both the DeWitts do.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, the one name that I haven't seen, one person I haven't seen yet, and I'm sure he'll make an appearance eventually, is Chaim Bloom. He's the only person in the front office I haven't seen. I even saw, back to a comment you made about these, I've even seen Michael Gersh on the backfields doing his special project work, whatever that may be. So yeah. Everybody from St. Louis is down, but Bloom is obviously going to spend another year, trying to stay in the background.
Yeah, I heard he was there. I don't know if that's any consolation. I heard the other day that he was there. So
okay, so maybe I'm just not running in the right circles. Story of my life.
No, he's probably under a rock somewhere. I think that's what it sounds like more than anything.
Well, it's clearly. We've talked about this before. It's clearly Mo's year. 2025 is clearly Mo's year. He's gotten off the reset word, and he now is using the transition word. In his opening remarks, I think I counted him saying transition 6 times. Um, so, that's just if you want to be cool and use a cool word, use transition. Don't use reset. But, he talked about, leaving the decks for next year, while at the same time carefully trying to balance being competitive. And I think those words scare a lot of people. They scare me because, trying to serve all these different masters means you won't be good at any of them.
Yeah. It's a tough line to walk. And then yeah, even when you start trying to dissect the difference in between reset and transition, if you really want to go down that rabbit hole, it's like so Nolan Arenado is the only thing that separates a reset from a transition. His presence is the only thing that separates a reset from a transition, especially after a couple of, one really great year amongst some really down years for him. Like, I don't know. It's a really interesting thing. And I guess all that's to say is I'm glad the off season's over. I'm ready to see baseball. I'm ready to watch games on Saturday or down the line all this week. I cannot wait to get done with this offseason stuff.
I think you speak for just about everybody who follows the St. Louis Cardinals. This long waiting for nothing to happen is finally over, and we're going to be able to see, like you said, really real baseball. One of the things that happened this last week, along with the pitchers and catchers reporting, and then of course all the position players reporting, is the beginning of step camp. There are 52 players, 52 minor leaguers, and these again are players who are not on the 40-man roster and are not among the 68, I think it is, in Major League camp. So there's basically in Major League camp, there's 40-man roster players and 28 other guys who aren't on the roster in big league camp. So the next 52 players are these players in step camp, and a lot of them you'll see in the late innings of these games that you'll see on TV, or if you're lucky enough to come down in person. And so the idea is to get these step campers up to speed a little quicker than the normal minor leaguers so they can come into games. There's some new interesting names that have shown up. Talked a little bit, I think we talked about Kyverson Ramirez a little bit, the right-hander from the Dominican 18-year-old who's number 37 on our list. He was there last week, tall and slender. But the guy that I really wanted to see, and they haven't started taking batting practice yet in step camp, but there's been this great attention on the players that performed so well in the Dominican Summer League last year. And I'm talking, of course, about catcher Rainiel Rodriguez, who's been over, but more importantly, shortstop Yairo Padilla, who Baseball America rated as one of the top prospects in the entire Dominican Summer League. And Padilla is definitely in step camp, tall and slender, certainly looks athletic. Again, I haven't seen him hit. You look fine, fielding ground balls and batting practice at shortstop. But Yairo Padilla is a guy that I definitely want to watch this spring. Anybody that you have got excited about that? Well, I'm sure a lot of guys you got excited about on the list, but anybody who stood out that on this? Oh, the other guy I want to mention, infielder Daniel Ortiz. Daniel Ortiz, a 16th rounder last year, was the only position player who didn't play, third rounder. He had played in the Prospect League with the old State College Spikes, which are now a development league team. And then he played in winter ball, and Ortiz is here in step camp as the third baseman. So, some new faces that we hadn't seen before. Oh, pitcher Brian Holiday from Oklahoma State. If you go to the Cardinal Nation, you can see a picture of his leg kick. He impressively can kick his leg as high as his head, which is something I couldn't do on the best day of my life.
Yeah, so those were actually some of the names that stood out to me. I know that over the last couple of weeks, you've been posting pictures of like Jacob Odell on the mound, which is really exciting for us Cardinal prospect people.
Looks to be healthy, maybe. Looks maybe to be healthy for the first time. I hate to jinx Alec Willis by even mentioning his name because if I do that, he'll get hurt. But even Alec Willis looks like he's like a month away from being able to throw. He says.
It's funny when they were talking about Kyle Lehigh being the Colorado kid getting a chance to start potentially at the major league level. I thought maybe they're just doing this to show Alec Willis that you can be from Colorado and you can still pitch as a starter in the majors.
When you said Colorado starter, I jumped all the way back to Marco Gonzalez.
Yes. Now we're talking. We just got to bring Marco back, and he can just see two guys go at it as inspiration. Yeah. He was. Well, it's nice to get the update on Alec Willis because it seems like everybody else, like Alec Willis, Victor Santos. I know that Drew Rom is like 2 weeks behind. I know he's throwing, but he's like 2 weeks behind in normal spring training.
Rom's on the pen. He looks normal to me. Okay. But on the other hand, Victor Santos has got his arm in a protective guy, and he had Tommy John surgery, so we're not going to see him for another year. There was some confusion
Yeah.
Pardon me for interrupting, by the way.
No,
There
you're
was some
fine.
confusion on MILB.com. It showed he was released. Well, he basically signed a 2-year contract, and maybe he signed for less money or something because of his arm. I don't know. But Victor Santos is definitely still in the Cardinal organization. So don't
Yeah.
be misled. Don't be misled by that weird transaction.
Yeah, that was weird, right? I think they released him and then they signed him to a 2-year contract after they released him. Whatever the stipulation was there, but yeah, it's also guys that you put pictures of on your website. Travis Honeyman. It's nice to see Travis out there talking with people and running around. Hopefully, that is a
And
sign.
swinging a bat.
Yes, exactly. I mean, he looks like he's all systems a go. Like those are some of the names that kind of jump out to me. It's nice to see Cade Winquest, a hard throwing righty with some good secondary pitches. It's nice to see him healthy after a shortened season last year. And of course, like the one that I will always go back to because I'm enamored with everything about him. And I know he's in major league camp, not in step camp somewhere, but like Cooper Jerpy. It's been nice to see you video like pictures of Cooper Jerpy, and I think that's really important for the organization.
Yeah, there was a particular shot of Jerpy's. I got him just at the right spot in his motion, and he's starting to come to plate, and you cannot see his hand. You cannot see his left hand or the baseball. And I'm
Yeah,
thinking, I'd be scared to death at this point, right? I've got to
absolutely.
start to get ready to swing, and I haven't even seen the hand or the ball yet.
Exactly. And speaking of great deception, you had a picture of Chen Wei Lin, how well he hides the ball, the 6'7" righty. Like you can tell that if you're at the plate, part of his success is in the deception and his ability to hide the baseball.
And he's still working on his grip. I'm not sure which pitch it was. Maybe but they have the equipment all set up, the TrackMan equipment with screens literally this far away from them as they're throwing. And a lot of times the guys will turn to the monitor between pitches to look and
Yeah.
see what their metrics are on the prior pitch before they throw the next one. And Lynn was very focused on, he was still fiddling with his grip, which is, what spring camp is for, right? Continue to keep tuning.
Yeah, I hope, and I don't know what it was in particular, but he kind of flashed a splitter last year, and it would be really interesting to see if it was the splitter. I know that he has command and spin issues with his breaking pitches. So hopefully it's probably just because there's such an emphasis from the new development regime on pitch design. It's probably just, whatever slider type he's messing with would be my guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've been producing some really awesome pictures and stuff out of step camp already, and it's got me fired up.
Yeah, good. Well, and there's also a lot of good stuff out there for Major League Camp. I spent one day in Major League Camp, but to be honest, I'm going to spend most of the time on the minor league side. And there's lots of people with lots of cameras and video and everything of what's happening in big league camp. But there are also a lot of minor leaguers there as well. And I'm looking forward to on the 14th of March will be the spring breakout game that they had for the first time last year, where a select team of Cardinals prospects will play a select team of Marlins prospects, and that'll sort of kick off the minor league spring training game schedule. And those games typically are at 1 o'clock, starting in mid-March on the back fields.
Yeah, excited! I can't wait for it, Brian.
Yeah, we'll have to. They'll announce those rosters at some point, probably closer to when that game is going to be. What else I want to cover? One of the early, a number I think I counted before the position players were required to report. I counted 16 of them in Jupiter.
Wow.
So, I mean, again, it wasn't just a few, and it was all the guys that you would think of, the Walkers and the Gormans and the Burlesons and the Donovans. And Donovan especially, I've watched Donovan take a lot of, there's this short infield that they had that they call the Ozzie Smith field, the Ozzie
Mhm.
Smith short infield. So think of it as a regular size infield, but no outfield, basically. And it's kind of shoehorned into a smaller space. But anyway, Donovan, worked out every day there taking balls. He would take them short balls on his knees, to do his doing all kinds of things. But what I saw mostly was Donovan doing work at second and third base. And some kind of work at short. It's kind of hard to tell from their positioning sometimes. But at least I haven't seen him do any outfield work, which is where he spent the majority of his time last year.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something he can pick up or will pick up easily. But what do you think is going to happen in these early games? Because now we know for sure, unless a trade happens, that Nolan Arenado's here, and that has a ripple effect on the entire position player roster.
Yeah, Mr. Marmol's going to have his hands full, I think. And I guess it isn't much different than last year. When you think about it, it all comes down to what he and the organization is willing to do in center. because, in my opinion, if you're still trying to win, your best bet is Lars Nootbaar in center. And I know the defensive side of it gets a little mushy. More than likely he'll be hurt in 3 weeks anyways, and then you can run out one of your defensive specialists out there.
But I'm not getting any, indications that they're serious about putting Newt in center. Right. I
Yeah,
mean, they're still in love with Siani and
yeah,
Scott, and now they got Randy, not Randy. What's Velotti's first name? Ryan
Ryan.
Velotti and
Yeah.
Hellman, the new, utility guy. So it's kind of hard to see what they're going to do in center.
Yeah, it seems like they're all just from the photos I've seen and some of the information I've gathered, it seems like they're operating the same as they would if Arenado was here as if he wasn't. You're still getting Gorman taking a lot of reps at third. Like you mentioned, both to JC, but like you mentioned to Donovan, he's been getting reps around the infield as well. The one thing is it really does sound like Alec Burleson will be doing almost all of his work at first base and DH this year. They've taken the
It certainly seems that way. Yeah, he's listed there. I saw him doing all of his work there. And again, it doesn't mean that he won't catch some fly balls, but I think the Cardinals realize that his defensive profile in the outfield is something they should try to avoid.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that I think they have enough faith in Brendan Donovan as a player that they don't really need to do very much with him in spring training. Because he can play everywhere. And yeah, not to get into that, but another little bit of news that we had since the last time you and I recorded was the arbitration hearings, the results of the
Oh yeah,
arbitration hearings.
yeah.
With Brendan Donovan losing his and Lars Nootbaar and Andre Palante winning theirs. And it's funny we're talking about this. Like, how are they going to adjust? How are they going to adjust? And one of the things we heard Brendan Donovan say, and of course he said, I'm not a disgruntled employee. But he also said that it was interesting to see them hold some of the things that they view as valuable against him in the arbitration hearing. And one of those things is that, they use him at 100 different positions at nearly everywhere that they can put him. And they, when you reference like the gold glove in the arbitration, the Cardinals will go back and they'll say, well, it's more valuable to have a second place gold glove finisher at one position than it is to have him at multiple positions. That was one of the things that they used against him. So
Interesting.
it's really fascinating that he's probably going to be used in that role again, just 2 weeks after they use that against him to win an arbitration case. So that's what I think will happen, Brian. Is I think we're operating very similar to how we operated in the 2024 season. It's just that Wilson Contreras is going to be at first, and so is Alec Burleson, and the outfield will be kind of what the outfield was in 2024, and the rest of the infield, minus the catching position, will be what the infield was in 2024.
And back to the arbitration point, that's a little bit of a hot button with me, and I don't want to come off like an owner wonk here because I'm not. But this is a process that was jointly agreed by owners and players to give those players between 3 and 6 years, because everybody at 6 years gets to become free agent. You can decide where you work and how much you get paid based on whatever the market will bear. But those players before they got to 6 years of service before had to take whatever the team was going to pay them. Now they put this thing in place called arbitration. And, you got to put your big boy pants on when you go into arbitration. Everybody's trying to win. You could argue, hey, the owner should just open the checkbook and give everybody what they want, but that's not realistic. So, if you go to arbitration, you have to be prepared to hear some things that you don't like, but you also have to be prepared to put it aside and move on. And Ryan Helsley is a guy who, I think he still harbors some bitterness over what happened a couple of years ago. And, it's too bad. But if the process needs to be fixed, then the players need to go back, or the owners, when they go to negotiate their next CBA and decide, hey, this isn't working. This is causing a bad relationship between manager and employee. We need to come up with something else.
Yeah, I agree. And, like when you first start hearing some of the stories, it's shocking. And then once you realize that that's just the process, it takes the shock out. It really does. And
Yeah, I mean,
it's
again, nobody wants to be told, hey, you don't do a good job on, on Wednesdays and Fridays, or when the glove's on your left hand, or when you're playing at this position. But, it's the name of the game. And, whether we like it or not, it always comes down to money, right? And
yeah,
that was Lance Berkman's famous line. They may say it's about something else, but it's always about the money.
that's right. Absolutely. So,
But hey,
yeah,
let's put money aside and enjoy baseball, right? We're just a few days away.
yeah, that's it. We just got to pretend. We just got to get to the weekend, Brian. Just got to get to the weekend so we can see live action. That's it.
That's it. And I don't think there's going to be any bad weather here. At least I've looked at the forecast and it looks good enough. So hopefully we'll see a lot of Cardinal baseball, and maybe see some excitement this spring from this roster. Because I get the people who are down on the team and say they're a last place team, and I think there's never been more uncertainty about what kind of team they're going to be. But they have players with upside. They have players with potential to get better. Um, it's just, that older starting rotation is definitely of concern to me.
Yeah, and luckily they have interesting depth behind them. I just, for me, like the thing, I just want to see like real opportunity in that starting. Like again, injuries or whatever, and it sounds like those five guys are penciled in or even penned into the rotation, barring injury. But I just want there to be a real opportunity for some of the promising arms at the major league level. That's what I want to see.
And let's face it, the Cardinals have a history of playing the contracts, right? They
Yeah.
play the guys with the big money. But in all fairness, last year, Steven Matz, when he had that downturn, and he also had some injuries too, but ended up in the bullpen. And the old days, they wouldn't have put that big contract in the bullpen, probably. So I hope that they do what's best for the team and best for their future while they're trying this balancing act of winning as many games as possible this year and trying to keep fan interest. And as much as some would like to see them completely go into a full tilt rebuild, they're just not going to do that. They said they weren't going to do it. It's unfortunate that the refocus or the reset, turned out to be just ridding themselves of some high priced players. It was, I think my hope and maybe your hope too, that we would have seen some exciting new prospects come in trades. But I think that remaining competitive and being unable to load Arenado kind of kept them with having to keep basically the same roster year to year minus three or four players.
Yeah, I think that to your point, Brian, I think we're going to see a very interesting next 3 months. You know, I don't know what to expect. I'm not obviously we've been watching all of these players for years and years now since they entered the system. I enjoy watching Brendan Donovan play. I enjoy watching Lars Nootbaar and Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman. Like I enjoy watching these guys play. And if they are going to get a real opportunity, a little bit of a runway, I'm excited about that. I'm just excited to see what it looks like. If anything, it's an internal fact finding mission for the organization, and especially with new coaches, new instructors, find out what you can get out of these players. And I'm excited for the season, even with the trepidations I have about roster construction.
Right. And, not a single game has been played yet. It would be wonderful if they could go all year without anybody getting hurt, but that's not going to happen. At least there was not the Alex Reyes shows up on the first day and says, I'm done for the year. That hasn't happened yet.
Oh,
But hopefully it won't. But, having depth is going to be important over a long season, even if it isn't obvious the first week or two. Folks and I should save this speech for a few weeks now in the future, but I'm going to throw it out now anyway. And that is, folks get overly worried about which 26 guys break camp with a team. And I get that. You want to be the guy riding in the parade, in Busch Stadium and riding in the convertibles or the Ford trucks or whatever it is. But the reality is the rosters change constantly. And the guys that make the team the opening day aren't going to be the same ones that are going to be there at the end of the year. I mean, sure, yeah, Arenado's going to be there, maybe. Wynn's going to be there. But, beyond that, there's going to be turnover. And this next level of guys that we focus on when you and I talk about the minor leagues are going to be, and I don't know if it's going to be Matt Koperniak or Prieto or Jimmy Crooks or who's going to step in this year. But I guarantee you, they're going to be guys that we're not thinking about that are going to become significant contributors to this team.
yeah, it's funny. Nathan Church is always one player that I'm quick to like dismiss. Not like dismiss as a prospect, but he has one tool, it's speed. He's a really good defender. He has a really strong arm. The rest of it's kind of sloppy. But he's the exact type of player who will come to spring training and will impress playing in those back 3 innings of every game in spring training. And then all of a sudden he'll make a Scott Hurst like MLB debut. Yeah, or maybe even something more than that. You
Well,
just
and
never know where it's going to come from.
to go back a few years, I mean, Lars Nootbaar, he was an okay prospect, but he was a guy in the teens. He wasn't a top 10 sure thing prospect. I mean, Tommy Edman wasn't really either. The Cardinals have a history of finding these guys, and when they get the opportunity, Donovan wasn't a can't miss star like a Jordan Walker or a Mason Wynn. And for whatever reason, these guys, when they find the right opportunity, can take advantage of it. And that's the everlasting excitement we get with following prospects.
Yeah, that's it exactly. I do think one thing that I always have to tell myself, and the audience, I would also remind them, and they all know it because they're smart. Those first couple of weeks of spring, and don't It's exciting. You're going to see Jordan Walker, or let's see who you'll see Chase Davis take Garrett Cole deep, and you'll get really excited about it. And you'll be like, maybe this guy can break with camp. Uh, it's those first couple weeks are fastball fest. It's pitchers getting their feel, hitters taking advantage of it. Just remember that it's not really until you get into March a little bit where you start to see things work themselves out. So be excited. I I'm excited. My girlfriend makes brats and tots for me on opening day of spring training every year, and I'm a happy little camper. So enjoy it, get excited, and I'll be anxious to talk over the incremental weekly with you about what we're seeing.
Yeah, great. What a great way to close. But I got to add one more comment, and that is you've just diminished the value of Shane Robinson's Grapefruit League batting title of 2009. Don't quote me on the year, but
Yeah.
you're on the great point. It's fun to be excited, but we got to keep things in context as well. And again, thanks for a great episode, Kyle. We went a little long, but you know what? I'm having a lot of fun doing this, and I hope you are too.
Yeah, me too. This is great, Brian. Again, next week we'll have minor leaguers to talk about and major league spring training games. So I can't wait.
All right, so we'll see everybody on, I guess, would be the 26th. In the meantime, take care and enjoy baseball.